The study of maps. It was one of Professor Oberon's skills.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, so you can't see this, but I can?
The first image from Jumanji 4 has finally dropped, and it makes one thing very clear. The game is no longer staying inside the console. Production on the fourth installment is officially underway, and the photo shows Kevin Hart, Karen Gillan, Dwayne Johnson, and Jack Black standing together in what looks like a real-world city setting. The caption reads, "Look who's on the loose," which feels like a direct hint that their in-game avatars have crossed over into reality. The sequel officially began active development in October 2024, and filming kicked off on November 11, 2025 in Los Angeles. Even though the franchise has been quiet since 2019, the core cast was always expected to return. Now that cameras are rolling, it feels like the story is about to expand in a way the series has been building toward for years. Because the last movie teased the game bleeding into the real world, this image doesn't just confirm the direction, it doubles down on it. To understand why this matters, it helps to go back to the ending of Jumanji: The Next Level. In the post-credit scene, a repairman accidentally reactivates the game, and suddenly a herd of ostriches appears in the real world. It was a quick moment, but it completely changed the stakes. The first reboot, Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, flipped the original concept by turning the board game into a video game. Then the sequel expanded the in-game world. But now, it looks like Jumanji 4 is taking everything full circle, except this time, the chaos is happening outside the game. That's where things get interesting. In the reboot films, the four main actors didn't just play original characters, they portrayed avatars controlled by teenagers in the real world. Johnson played Dr. Smolder Bravestone, Hart played Mouse Finbar, Gillan played Ruby Roundhouse, and Black played Professor Shelley Oberon. Those avatars reflected exaggerated traits of the teens controlling them. But if those avatars are now physically present in the real world without being controlled, it raises a bunch of questions. Because if they're no longer being played, they might not act the same way. They could have their own personalities separate from the teenagers. Even though they were once extensions of Spencer and his friends, they may now operate independently. That shift could create conflict, especially if the real-world characters come face-to-face with their in-game counterparts. It's one thing to control a fearless adventurer, it's another thing to deal with that adventurer walking around Los Angeles on their own terms. The chaos doesn't stop with the main four. Nick Jonas is set to return as Jefferson Seaplane McDonough, and Aquafina will also be back as Ming Fleetfoot. Since the story appears to be bringing game characters into reality, it's likely they'll appear outside the digital jungle as well. That means even more personalities colliding and more unpredictable energy driving the story forward. There are still some absences, though. Rory McCann, who played Jurgen the Brutal in the last film, hasn't been confirmed to return. It's also unclear whether the player behind that villain will ever be revealed. Although that thread might remain unresolved, the focus seems to be on merging both worlds rather than revisiting every past character. Looking at the franchise timeline shows how far it has come. Jumanji introduced the magical board game concept decades ago. Then the reboot era started with Welcome to the Jungle in 2017, followed by The Next Level in 2019. Now, Jumanji 4, scheduled for December 11, 2026, is positioned as the possible finale. That possibility isn't just speculation. Back in March 2023, Hart suggested that the fourth film might be the last. Johnson later echoed that sentiment, describing the new movie as an emotionally fitting conclusion. Because the concept of the game invading the real world feels like the biggest escalation imaginable, it makes sense that the franchise could end here. Once you bring the fantasy into reality, there isn't much further you can push the premise without completely reinventing it. The real-world crossover also creates an opportunity to wrap up lingering story threads. Spencer's arc, his confidence struggles, and his connection to the game could finally come full circle. Eddie and Milo's storyline from the previous film might get proper resolution, and the relationships between the teens and their avatars could reach a natural endpoint. Since both worlds are colliding, there's space to address everything that's been left hanging. Another major casting update confirmed that Jonas and Danny DeVito are officially returning. DeVito played Edward Eddie Gilpin, Spencer's grandfather, who hilariously ended up inside Johnson's avatar in The Next Level. His return suggests the real-world family dynamic will still matter. It also means more comedic contrast, because Eddie interacting with the literal embodiment of his in-game form could be one of the sequel's funniest angles. Alongside them, Bebe Neuwirth, Lamorne Morris, Maren Hinkle, and Rhys Darby are also coming back. Darby's Nigel Billingsley has served as the game's guide in previous installments, so if the game's rules are breaking down, his role might shift in unexpected ways. New additions like Dan Hildebrand and Jack Jukes have joined the cast, though their roles remain undisclosed. The main quartet will once again portray their avatars, but this marks the final time the group will assemble in this way. Johnson described the project as ending the franchise on a grace note, which suggests the tone could blend spectacle with emotional closure. Even though the series is known for action and comedy, it is always centered on friendship and growth. Because of that foundation, a finale that balances chaos with heart feels consistent. Plot details are still under wraps, and there isn't even an official title yet, but the biggest clue remains that post-credits tease in 2019. If animals can stampede through suburban streets, then the avatars stepping into reality feels inevitable. The question is whether they'll remain separate beings or somehow reconnect with the teens who once controlled them. Alex Wolff, Madison Eisman, Sir Darius Blaine, and Morgan Turner, who play the real-world teenagers, are expected to return as well. That confirmation strengthens the idea that both sets of characters will share the screen in meaningful ways. Because if the story is about worlds colliding, leaving out the original players wouldn't make sense. What makes this direction compelling is that it pushes the franchise to its logical extreme. The original 1995 film brought jungle threats into a small town. The reboot sent teenagers into a digital jungle. Now the avatars themselves might be roaming free in modern-day Los Angeles. Each step has expanded the scale, so this evolution feels earned rather than random. If handled well, Jumanji 4 could be the most high-energy installment yet. The action sequences could spill into recognizable urban spaces instead of fictional game levels. The humor could come from fish-out-of-water scenarios as larger-than-life heroes try to function in ordinary society. And the emotional stakes could rise because the characters might have to choose between shutting the game down permanently or letting these new identities continue to exist. Since it's positioned as the final chapter, there's also room for bold storytelling choices. The franchise doesn't need to hold anything back for another sequel. That freedom could lead to bigger risks and more satisfying payoffs. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.